I love watching these types of videos, and I'm so excited to finally contribute with my own list. Hi, my name is Andi. I'm a chaotic reader, and I feel like every autumn my reading mood receives a boost. There's something about the gloomy weather, the changing leaves, the chilly air that makes me want to stay on the couch and read all weekend. I'm saying this at the end of September, where the weather here in Austria still is like 24 degrees Celsius and sunshine, but you get the point. You can read any type of book at any point of the year, a summer beach read in December if you want to, but if you're looking for specifically fantasy stories with autumn vibes and a bit of romance, let me share my top recommendations with you. The first category I called Fae, but the human is clever too, and it refers to the dynamic found in these stories. Usual Fae lore, seasonal courts, tricky bargains, but the human characters are capable of outsmarting them. If I think about an autumn book, the cover of An Enchantment of Ravens comes to my mind instantly. It is the ideal book to pick up at the beginning of the season because, if I remember correctly, the season slips from summer to autumn at the beginning of the story, and we meet Rook, the autumn Fae prince, who commissions a portrait from Isabel, a mortal painter woman. This I recommend to people who are just starting to dip into fantasy books with Fae and would like to read a standalone story with slow burn romance, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to those who like their Fae love interest to be perfect and super spicy. If An Enchantment of Ravens is suited toward the beginning of the autumn, I would say Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is suited toward the end when the weather is rather close to winter. It's the right mixture of cottagecore and eerie in my opinion. We follow Emily during her research into the local fairy folk, joined by her fellow professor, the insufferable but charming and capable Wendell Bumblebee. If you like the line, "You are the bane of my existence" from Bridgerton Season 2, and you like love interests like Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, you should definitely give this one a try. If you like your main characters to be the hero types, wanting to save the world and reach a noble goal while helping everyone, you might not enjoy this, as Emily would very much like to stay at the sidelines and just do her research, but fate keeps testing her. Funny that I mentioned Bridgerton before, because the last recommendation in this category, Half a Soul, takes place in Regency, England, where our main character was cursed as a child with half of her soul stolen away. It is a light-hearted one with magicians and fairies and ballrooms. I would say more focused on the love story than a complex plot, so if that's not your preference, you should skip this. But if you are looking for a historical romance read with major Studio Ghibli and Howl's Moving Castle vibes, Half a Soul won't disappoint. Next up, we have the category Castles, Princes and Magical Woods. These next books might not be particularly super autumny, but there's something about the plot taking place in castles surrounded by woods, horse riding scenes, that still gives the essence of autumn, if that makes sense. I realized I never spoke about this book on this channel, and that's wild because it's one of my all-time favorites. I believe I originally read it in 2022 and did a reread of it, was it a year after? Yeah, a year after, and still, A Taste of Golden Iron remains a 5-star book in my opinion. It takes place in a richly imagined fantasy world, a little medieval, a little inspired by the Ottoman Empire, in a court where we follow a shy prince, the brother of the current queen, and his loyal but seemingly aloof bodyguard. The magic system is really interesting in this one, with touch taste abilities of metal, where you could tell the ingredients and where they came from, which gains importance within the central plot when the prince is accused of treason. But while that is interesting, the true brilliance of this story lies in its characters and the emotional character development. The prince and the bodyguard's characters are both my favorites. Despite appearances, they are just two cinnamon rolls who open up to each other, and it's just so beautiful to see. This book has the most stunning lines about devotion and yearning I've ever read, and that is no small accomplishment. So if you like your fantasy romance with beautiful yearning and two cinnamon rolls who go through actually believable character development, you need to read A Taste of Golden Iron. The only example I could think of when someone wouldn't like this, if you prefer your fantasy to be dark and eerie and your main characters to be morally grey or evil, that's very much not the case here. Those who watch my channel regularly could have guessed that if I mention castles, princes and magical woods, I need to talk about the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. There is also beautiful yearning here, but a bit more complicated, with the Prince of Hearts Jax, who seemingly doesn't care for romance, and Evangeline Fox, who is chasing her happily ever after. Definitely recommend it to people who like whimsical, fairy tale fantasy worlds, a love story stretched across 3 books but never boring. But if you need your main characters to always make decisions that make sense and lead somewhere, you might be disappointed by Evangeline's clear lack of thinking about consequences. And last but not least, to close this category with a duology that really captures the autumn vibes, I have to talk about One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. As you can see it already on the cover, it has stunning gothic imagery with creepy, misty woods, a magic system based on cards, an ancient riddle. There are just so many things done well in this story. So if you're looking for an atmospheric fantasy read with all of the above, plus not one, but 2 romance subplots, one of them featuring a prince with a tortured past, you should pick up the duology. If you prefer complex plots, unique plot twists, and unpredictable character decisions in your fantasy stories, this one unfortunately won't be to your liking. The next category I called Dreamy Tales, and the recommendations that fit into it are the little plot, all vibes kind. First up, I want to tell you about Dreams Lie Beneath from Rebecca Ross, who is the author of the Divine Rivals duology, which I also recommend to anyone in any season. In this standalone fantasy story, dreams are especially important as it takes place in a small town that's been cursed by nightmares. I realize a lot of these fantasy stories feature curses, but I also think curses are somehow very autumn, you know? Anyway, here it's on our main character Clementine as the magician guarding the town to fight back against the curse, but things get complicated when 2 magicians arrive to challenge her for her position. Not gonna lie, I read this last year and the exact plot points did not really stick, but I remember enjoying the vibes, the magical duels, a bit of rivals to lovers elements, and the small town setting, so I would recommend it to anyone who prefers these. However, if you like your fantasy world building to be very layered and detailed and complex with high stakes, you might want to give this one a miss. Actually, in that case, you might want to give this entire category a miss, because The Night Circus is very much the same. It's a beautiful, enchanting fantasy with dueling magicians and a circus full of whimsical characters. If you're like me, who had it on the shelf for long months before giving it a try, this is your sign to finally pick it up. It's the perfect historical fantasy read for the gloomier months. Maybe if you prefer linear, very precise storytelling, you won't like it, but you still might, like, it's just that good. The last book in this category, Sorcery of Thorns, has more of a solid plot than the previous 2, but to be honest, it's worth reading for the vibes alone. It is usually recommended if you are looking for a love interest similar to Howl, the magical world building a little bit Ghibli-like and whimsical, with the main character working as a library apprentice. Plus, if you are looking for an unforgettable side character, you need to read this for Silas, Nathaniel's demonic servant. If fairy tales, sorcerers, magical libraries, and demonic servants do not sound exciting to you, you do not stand a chance of liking this book. Talking about vibes, let's turn to the more gothic stories for the last category. If you have ever thought, what if there was a book where the main character cannot die and the love interest is literal death, I present you Belladonna. And I do mean death itself, like not even like a god of death or something. Unfortunately, there is little moral dilemma about this particular feeling, even though that could have been a very interesting addition. You will have a great time with this story if you are looking for a gothic fantasy read with a bit of a murder mystery plotline and an old mansion and our main girl Signa learning to live for herself. If you expect the plot to stay realistic, well, as realistic as it can get within a fantasy story, and you need your side characters to be complex and important, you won't really like this one, I'm afraid. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride is one of those books that stayed with me long after reading it. There's just something equal parts fascinating and equal parts bizarre how Roshani Chokshi crafts her characters and the world here. You will be left questioning what is real as you uncover the details of a twisted friendship and love, starting from an outsider point of view. Peak gothic vibes with yet another ancient mansion, beautiful writing, a must-read for the autumn season in my opinion. I do not recommend it to people who dislike this kind of embellished writing style and dislike not knowing exactly what's going on with the plot at certain points. I named this section Gothic Vibes, but actually there's some kind of ancient mention in all three books, also in a study in drowning, which was a new release last year, and I filmed an entire reading vlog about it. This one is worth reading for the eerie, misty atmosphere. Again, makes you question what's real, but it also focuses on character development and finding your own voice as a woman in society that tries everything to keep you silent. Recommended for dark academia fans, obviously. Maybe not recommended for people looking for cozy, light-hearted fantasy with sweet romance, because it's not that. Talking about dark academia, if you're interested in some more recommendations for autumn, I have a whole video dedicated to it from last year, where I list, I believe, 20 books from well-known ones like The Secret History to hidden gems from international authors. I will link it above. That was a lot of talking. Those were the 12 books I had in mind for this list. Hope I did them justice and could convince you to add them to your TBRs, or the opposite, make you realize that they might not be for you. Let me know if you have similar recommendations, I'm curious to hear them. Happy reading this autumn to all of us. See you in my next video. Until then, take care. Bye!